love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry enormous guns. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Sean Thompson. And this is the Sean Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
I have to tell you, I think the reason I enjoy our conversations with our next guest so much, not only is he an expert when it comes to the law, and he is somebody who has clerked at the United States Court of Appeals, and he's worked for the United States Department of Justice. He's also consulted for the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. But he's an active professor of law. But it's not just the law. It's about what's right and what's wrong. That's what I love about having the opportunity to talk to Professor Robert Steinbuch. How are you?
I'm doing great, my friend. How are you?
Well, very, very interested in a lot of your articles that you've been kicking out. And it's amazing. And you work tirelessly. I think I've only got 4 of probably 12. But it's a fascinating topic as far as I can see on the 4 that I picked and we're going to talk about today. And I'll tell you why. Barack Obama was a perfect salesman for a scandal mafia government to me. So when we talk about your article where it says money back guarantee, and you're talking about kids, college enrollment, I am so reminded of the for-profit universities that when Barack Obama first was sworn into office that he attacked vehemently. This is before the federal government took over student lending. He attacks all these colleges that, I would have never considered sending my kids to, or other people. But if you don't have the means to send them to a historically accredited college, there are online universities that look appealing to ordinary, hardworking guys who can't afford big things. So he said they were all garbage, right? So the stocks plummet, and I'm reminded of Phoenix University or University of Phoenix. That's the biggest one. And the stock was crushed. As it's crushed, his friends buy it. Literally his friends that he played basketball with, Barack Obama. Then all of a sudden, the government abuse of regulation goes away. Now they're back in business. And simultaneously with that, Barack Obama and the federal government usurps and takes over student lending. And the problem goes from $600 billion to now it's $2.4 trillion. But what happened was, a lot of people got rich in the education business. So when I was reading your article about your college, it's fascinating when you look at the fact you had this big spike in new students, but you also had a tremendous drop-off of kids who should have never been there, right?
Well, you bring up some very important statistics here, which is there has been this movement for online education, and all of these claims we're going to have what's called a demographic cliff. Well, what's the demographic cliff? Allegedly, because in like 08, 09, there was a drop in birth rate as a consequence of the recession, that we're going to have a blip in people going to college. If you have fewer people born in a particular year, you have fewer people 20 years later going to college. And they built this whole narrative around how, it's a demographic cliff, we're going to run out of students. Because you had a blip? What do you think? The prior 20 years didn't have blips for other reasons? You think it was entirely consistent? And so the column you're referring to speaks about this overall consistency in our growth here in Arkansas, but that applies elsewhere also, and that it's upward growing. And you hear people say, yeah, but the birth rate is going up now at 3% instead of 6%. I'm making up the numbers, right? Yeah, but we're a university, for example, and we're fixed. So any increase means more students, not fewer students. Maybe not as many more as you would have predicted if it was a higher birth rate, but you're going up, not down. And so all of I bring this all up in this column that you're referring to because all of this is the crutch that the folks who are pushing online education rest on. Why? Because we need to go to places where people aren't going to college right now. That's apparently in their basements, so they can go to college online. And I remain skeptical of online education. It has a role. I think that, for example, when we had synchronous, meaning live online education, meaning you turn it on and there's the professor and you're talking to the professor, it's part of a class, I think that's a very doable thing. This other form of online education it's the old, the back of the matchbook that you and I saw when we were kids, this correspondence school method. But now it's videos. You watch a 7-minute video. It can't be longer than 7 minutes, and we call it a module, or I call it a nodule, because cancer is a nodule. And you do this, and then you take a quiz. And if you don't pass the quiz, you take the quiz again. And you keep taking the quiz until you run out of any answers but the right answers. So, and that's how you're supposed to learn.
And well,
go ahead.
It's insane, because the goal is obviously to give unqualified people the concept of entitlement, because they pretend that they did something when only the online computer and they know that they did exactly what you just said, took the test 400 times and have no idea what the hell they did, right?
And now add AI into it, right? If it's not a multiple, well, even if it is a multiple choice question. So you set up another window on your computer or on your phone, and you type the question in, and then the answer is in, and then AI gives you the answer. Well, you can't do that in the classroom, or at least not generally if you have a class run by people like me who monitor what the students are doing, and you ask them a question, and you see them typing in the computer, you say, listen, close the screen on the question on the computer. I just asked you a question. I don't need you to look it up in the book. I don't need you to figure it out. Think. I want you to think.
You've put your finger on the ignorance and arrogance of everything we face in political swindlers in society, but they tell you that they're better than everybody else because they have some sort of degree, they think. And it leads me to what I've been dying to talk to you, because one of the most outrageous and predictable and obvious scandals was this imbecile Ian Roberts in Iowa. I mean, that is unbelievable. He said he went to Yale, he went to Harvard, he went wherever the hell you wanted him to go.
The guy.
I mean, it
is your audience, right? That's a superintendent guy out in Iowa, very charismatic guy, and all of these credentials. But it's starting to fall apart. It's starting to chip away, and nobody did a background check. Nobody determined, I'm sorry, that's not true. They hired a company to do a background check.
Yeah, that's even worse.
Pick up on really key problems.
Well, I was a big fan of Catch Me If You Can, the Frank Abagnale scandal, but he did it in the 60s. This guy did it now, and it goes to show you that if you have people who are hiring people because of an agenda, because of a political affiliation, because of affirmative action, they can cultivate and ignore and create any credential that's needed. And in there lies the real problem. And you would think during this time when kids could cheat on a test by talking to their phone, we could avoid this kind of scandal. But you and I have talked about the scandal in Texas, where over 2,400 teachers paid $2,000 to get their teacher certificate. You look at the teachers in Chicago public schools, and you watch behind when they negotiate for their contracts. I don't think the teachers can read or do math. So you've got a big education problem, and computers may fill a void, of which I think AI and teachers can solve something with homeschooling and parent supervision. But they also can create more scallywags and more unqualified dimwits, can't they?
100%.
And in there lies the real problem.
Right. No, we need traditional education. We need education where people go into a building, they sit in a classroom, they demonstrate their ability. I heard a great line. You know what a 4-year degree, a college degree gets you? It demonstrates, people say, wow, what am I going to learn? I'm going to learn sociology, and then I'm going to go work in a business. I'm not using that. You demonstrate to the employer your ability to complete an ongoing, important task.
Yes.
But you don't demonstrate that if the way you learn is in 7-minute nodules that you AI your way through between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. in your basement. You haven't demonstrated anything. And so I remain skeptical of this module-based online education. Go ahead.
The reason the government loves it is because the government's never made more money on something that has no consequences, and that is student financing. And that to me is you could look at the cost of college, and you could look at the debt of students and parallel it from when Barack Obama usurped that entire business. So today, I don't know if you heard, Donald Trump is floating the idea of selling that debt because the government really cannot collect it and doesn't want it. After all, it's debt that has a time frame of 40 years on it because of the way in which they do not disclose what debt is to the most financially ignorant sector of our society, children. These same kids couldn't buy a car or get a mortgage, but they can sign for a $300,000 loan they don't know about, let alone the terms of it. So Trump is trying to re-privatize it, which can be good. There's no question about it. But unless they make it harder to get those loans, it really doesn't fix the problem, right?
Right.
You have to make it hard. Only kids who deserve those loans should get those loans.
If you track the cost of education, it goes up every time we create more loan programs. Why? Because, you could have paid $5,000 out of your pocket, but we, the schools, have lobbied that you are entitled to student loans after all. And we won for your benefit. So now you can take out $20,000 per year. And guess what our tuition is? $25,000. 20 you took out in loan, the 5 you got in your pocket. So you didn't save a penny.
No.
We just charge you more money.
And that's not bad, considering what some of these colleges cost, really.
Oh, no, that's a made-up number. That number don't exist anymore.
Right, and you had a lot of kids drop out. They take the loan, they drop out, they don't commit, and that's the rest of it. But you guys also were involved in a little bit of scandal. Now, you and I talked, the last time we talked was the day after our friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Mm-hmm. And, everyone is still reeling from it, but not necessarily. Not necessarily in the education circles. I didn't know this until I read this article, but did you have somebody that was hired for you that celebrated that?
You're going to love this. So we hired a woman to take over our tax law clinic at the law school at which I teach. And good credentials, solid credentials, not Harvard wasn't calling her, and that's quite okay, by the way, because if Harvard was calling her, we wouldn't, or any of us, me included, by the way, we wouldn't be working here. But by the way, we have a really solid faculty with excellent credentials, really impressive stuff. Actually, speaking of Harvard, we have one faculty member with, I think, 3 degrees from Harvard. I mean, come on, share a little. Don't be so greedy. We hired this person, like I said, with good credentials, and it turns out after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, murdered, she's celebrating, as you've seen various people do. She's doing it on Facebook. She says some really creepy statements about when a good person dies, an evil person should die. And by the way, using the word should, like future-oriented, should's a future-oriented word in the context of about violence is really uncomfortable. This became known a few days later. The school stepped in immediately. They did it right, by the way. Not by the way, let's focus on that. They stepped in and they suspended her pending an investigation. All of the senior government, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the AG said this woman needs to be fired. Now, they're not in the chain of command, but they expressed their First Amendment opinions as they're entitled to. And she was put, like I said, she was suspended. So I started to investigate thereafter, being that I write a column for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and I find a litany, my friend, of posts that are plain and simple anti-white people racist posts. You can characterize them no other way than that. So now we have an even bigger problem as far as I'm concerned, because we have the anti-Kirk statements. That's protected if it's just, I'm talking about in general, Those
Sure.
people that have made anti-Kirk statements that are just anti-Kirk after his death, not nice, but protected by the First Amendment. If you're a government employee, you have slightly less protection, but there have been, like there's a teacher in another state who got reinstated temporarily, at least by a court, because they said, no, this she's allowed to say. So we had our professor making some more egregious anti-Kirk statements that may have passed the threshold to permit the school to fire her. But frankly, the thing that is far, far worse are these sort of vicious anti-white statements. There was one statement. I'm trying to think back. She was referring to some incident where some black individual, I think, was harmed, and she said, "Black people are not the apex predators of humankind. That's white people." Wait, what?
Can I ask what was her pigmentation of her skin?
She's a black woman.
Oh,
She's an African American woman.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it's really
so-
you know what it shows though is the lack of intellect. And before you said about the race, you know what I was going to say to you? I was going to tell you, you and I are lucky, and so many people listening, because we're older and we have a reference of character of a country where anybody of any affiliation would hear that a 31-year-old kid who's got a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old and a wife, and he gets killed. And I mean, I'm thinking back of the people I knew in my life that may have been Democrat or whatever. I can't think of a one that would be like, good.
Right.
And, you know, to see what you have now, it reminds me of the threat that information poses to the deceiver. And if you look back, you know, I have to say, and I had the really an honor, a pleasure by God. I'd met him and I argued with him. Robert, the first time I ever met him, we argued. And we laughed and I made fun of him. And he goes, "I like the way you argue. I like the way you look. You're 7 feet tall, you handsome son of a gun. Like, you look like Gregory Peck to me." I used to call him Gregory Peck. So anyway, I never really listened the way I should have to his actual arguments, because I knew him, right? And I would listen to his show. He'd let into my show. He's a couple hours before, and I would tune in and hear him. So I got his show. But when you looked at him on these college campuses, what was the threat, really? What was the reason to hate him? He would open up a discussion to anything, to anybody. He would say what he said, and then all right, you're done. And you're done. And I don't know, I'm sure you're like everybody else, and you probably have watched more Charlie Kirk than you did prior to this terrible tragedy. But when you look at that, and when you look at the result of what Turning Point was doing, just the outside, and we're going to have a conversation, why would a teacher, a professor like yourself, I mean, you think about what it takes to be you, the knowledge, the work, the effort. Why would your character
be me,
so,
the good looks?
Or the good looks, I forgot that. Why would the character be so low that this kid would pose a threat to you? And the answer is because you're teaching a lie. That's what the threat is.
I've got a better one for you. So in my columns, I don't know if it was that one that you read, because I've been keeping up on this story, I also wrote about a retired dean emeritus from my law school who he posted around the same time, was all in this Charlie Kirk post-assassination period. He said, amongst other things, that the things that Charlie Kirk said harmed people. This is a guy, by the way, who used to teach the Constitution, constitutional law. The things that Charlie Kirk said harmed people. Meaning not the things that Charlie Kirk advocated for that eventually became a policy, and that policy was harmful. Whether you think it was harmful or not, that's fine, but you can claim a policy is either harmful, helpful, or none of the above. But that he said the words supporting the policy, that in and of itself, according to this retired dean emeritus from my school who was teaching constitutional law to students, that in and of itself was harmful. And
well, isn't
what's
that
dangerous?
Isn't that why they killed everybody who ever said anything that threatened the political scams that went along, whether you go from modern day to Malcolm X even, and I don't agree with him on anything, but they killed him because he said what he said was dangerous and it was harming people rather than just debating it? Or you go all the way back to Jesus, right? Isn't that what the Romans and they said about Jesus? He's harming people?
Right.
And, you know, it reminds me of...
precisely the point, my friend, which is what that Dean Emeritus is doing is he's giving fuel to the crackpots that, like the guy that killed Charlie Kirk, and I don't know his particulars, but there are enough of them out there that I can make this general claim. If it doesn't apply to him, it probably does, by the way, that you're giving fuel to the crackpots that use violence to shut people up, because you're telling them that the thing you're shutting up is essentially itself violent, and it's not. It simply is not.
Boy, oh boy, it's tough to live with these imbeciles, isn't it? I don't know how you do it, Dr. Robert Steinbuch. I seclude myself from all morons. I refuse to talk to an entirely group of political people and half of the other group of people. So I give you a lot of credit for dealing with it, but I give you more respect because you're doing it for kids and you are impacting the future, my friend. And I love the fact that you're doing it. Professor of Law at the University of Arkansas, Professor Robert Steinbuch. And you're writing constantly, and I know the name of the paper, but I always forget the name of the site, the best way to go to it. What is it?
That's all right. I write for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. You can look it up online. There is a paywall, and you can always get in touch with me on my email or Facebook. It's, Rob Steinbuch.
That's all right. We're capitalists. Everybody listening to this show, I don't have one communist, and if I do, they're chewing on a steering wheel. Thanks for making time for me.
God bless.
You too, brother. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
He will never negotiate his constitutional rights with the government. Live free or die on The Sean Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.